Roll up, roll up. See the future stars of rock. Watch 3 live bands, magic tricks, guitar masterclasses. Be entertained by card shufflers, chord shufflers, and note makers. In the awesome surroundings of the Weald of Kent and at the big top of this kingdom, your chance to be entertained or even win a BC Rich guitar. On the 12th of March, starting at 3:30 through to 7:30 at the wonderful Kingdom near Penshurst, we will be doing a fundraising event for the Ikaro Music to enable young people to learn to play the guitar and write songs. Be sure to be there. Numbers are limited. Follow the link in the show notes on the Eventbrite.
So today I'm talking to Maria Harle. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on the programme. It's really good, actually. So, Maria, first question is, or trivial question, I should say.
Okay.
What do you do?
What do I do? I play with the animals and I talk with the animals. I have a fun time hanging out with animals, looking after animals, and then introducing people to that as well and giving them the joy side of it. So I have all of the hardship and all the emotional struggles of it, and I just give them the nice bit.
Cool. That sounds amazing. Now, to arrive at that, there's normally a little story beforehand, right?
Yeah.
So, because obviously, as we talk about what you do, it'll sort of unfold how amazing what you do is.
Right.
So let's go back to the beginning, because I knew you years ago.
Yes.
But in the capacity of playing a musical instrument. So tell me a little bit about that, because you've done a lot of things, haven't you, really?
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually, because I was talking to my husband about this earlier and I said that we were doing this. And I said, I don't know how I'll answer a lot of your questions, because on a day-to-day basis, people ask me a million questions, but they are the most basic questions.
Yeah.
And so you're right. You've just reminded me that, probably it's quite a lot that's gone on that's led to this, but I don't ever really...
No.
I don't really ever think about it, because no one ever asks. So it's sort of, it's all disappeared in the back of beyond. But I used to teach toddlers, preschoolers, music. So I was doing that, and I was a youth worker. This is when it started to sort of come together. And so I had those 2 little part-time jobs. And at the same time in my personal life, animals were coming into our lives, and it was happening very organically. It wasn't on purpose. And then one day my husband said to me, your animals have got to earn their keep. And I took it literally and decided, fine, I won't rehome any of these animals. I'll carry on doing what I'm doing, but they will, fine, they're going to earn their keep, and I can carry on doing what I'm doing. And before I was doing, or around the same time I was doing those 2 other little jobs, I was in a lot of bands and gigging and stuff, different kinds of music. And obviously I trained in music. I went to college and university and did music there. So some people are always surprised when I do bring that up. They find that, they say, music. Oh, I thought you'd have studied animals. But actually I've noticed that a lot of people that were in music at some point want to become more removed from the hustle and bustle that can often associate that lifestyle and that culture, and they do go into jobs with animals or farming, or so it isn't that unusual.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, because it's that sort of thing of what the thing that struck me about you when you were at school, you had a. I don't like saying natural ability because I think everybody's got a natural ability, but you had a way of sort of developing your playing, which was very different from everybody else.
In what way?
Well, you had a lot of interest in things like sort of folk stuff, but it wasn't the obvious stuff. It was very, I was going to say left field, meaning only from the perspective that you were coming up with ideas and influences that were very different from anybody else, even if they were interested in, from what I saw, people being interested in folk. So maybe you could talk about that, because I think this is interesting, because I think it's more about your character.
You just used a word that I think was perfect. You didn't want to use it, but I would say that a lot of people probably think that the way that my thought process is in general in life are left field. And to me, it just is, everything is just the way I just see, well, that's the clear view that I have. Yes. And other people are like, what? And I'm in everything from what you're saying there, and definitely with the music I listen to or have listened to in the past, or the things that I've been drawn to, or particular songs or musicians or anything in life, is, I guess other people would perhaps think left field, but to me, I'm absolutely just drawn in that odd direction. And I think in every thing of my life, from, I don't know, interior design to what I have for dinner, everything, I think. But to me, it's not I'm trying that on purpose. It's just that I know that other people have said to me that, so it's interesting that you say that, because.
Well, the thing was, it seemed completely organic with you.
Yeah.
What I can remember. Totally organic.
That's how
I do remember once, you might not remember this.
Okay.
There was some assessment that was being done because you were doing, I don't know, GCSE music or something like that, because it was in a grammar school.
Yes.
And you got quite upset about something that a teacher had said to you about.
What did they say?
Well, it was something that they were trying to straitjacket what you were doing. And I can remember you being a bit irritated by the whole thing. And I said, well, really, you should just do what you want.
Was it art? What was it? Was it art or music?
No, it was music, I think. It was, I know, to be honest, I mean, it was actually a really good music department in that school, but it was just something about the way that, I can't quite remember how it was put, but it was almost like, well, to get the marks, you need to do this type of thing.
That would have really rounded
right, what I'm saying. And of course, my attitude to that was, well, yeah, I'm not so sure, because it's almost like, well, if you're already naturally quite musical, which you obviously were, I mean, from the point of view that you were infused by music, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Then why do you start trying to change that in order to just tick boxes, even if that does mean that you get a better mark?
Do you know that's really interesting, because when I was at one of the music colleges, music departments in a college I was at, I remember there was this guy that was really, really naturally talented. I'm still friends with him today. It might even be someone that you know. And I remember that he sometimes didn't turn up for the lesson. He'd probably hate me if he hears this, but he wouldn't turn up for a lesson or something. And I remember somebody grumbling about it, and then, well, why did he get away with that? I didn't get away with it last week when I didn't turn up. And I can't even remember the tutor, but the tutor turned around and went, well, we all know he's going to make it anyway. So do you know what I mean? Like, they were saying that we're not going to harass him because he's on his way. He's going to do that. He's going to be there. And, he's having a wonderful time in music, doing what he wants and doing what he loves. And they were right that he didn't necessarily, at the time, when you're a student and you want to all be treated exactly the same, at the time it seemed kind of unfair, but now I totally understand that they were trying to not do what you're saying, because they might stop him from doing what he now does, which is pursuing what was right for him musically, and now having a very rewarding musical career. They were right to just.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. There's a little story about there's a guy that I used to teach who's Adele's guitarist, and he was, he was at Brit School with her, and that's how they started working together. And I was talking to him a little while ago, and And of course, obviously, there's a lot made of the fact that she went there, right? And he said, he was talking about, the stuff, and he made some comment, and he went, about Adele. He said, well, when she was there, because she was like never there.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, well, it's just like, I'm going. Don't need to. So I think in actual fact, maybe that is a little bit better at college from that point of view. You realise somebody's obviously got something. But in a school situation, that's not the case, because people are thinking about marks and all the rest of it. But the point I was saying was that you obviously had, I was going to use the word radical. You had a different way. You had a different way of looking at things, which was really good. And so I think this is going to come up again and again in a conversation about everything else. So do you still play, or you?
I have a really strange relationship with music, which I think probably really surprises people. I think that I did become oversaturated with studying music and then playing in bands and the actual doing it and surrounding myself with other people that were musical. I had enough of it, and it kind of was like almost, do you know what? And it was almost like, when you eat too much of something or you drink something, like there's a drink you drank as a teenager that you can't touch because it reminds you of being really sick, right? For me, like whiskey, like malt whiskey, can't touch the stuff. And it was the same thing, that I now have a slight aversion, and I think that people are really surprised by this. But again, going back to you saying, I have a left field approach. I do still have music in my life. It's just not the way that maybe you might imagine or that other people would expect of me. I do have access to a music studio. We have a music studio here, and we have all my stuff is up there, and all my mum's partner stuff's up there. So we have this, everything's set up. My PA's up there. There's my guitars, my bass guitars, and there's a drum kit, and it's there. And if I want to use it, it's there. But I rarely do. I learnt the banjo in the pandemic. And it turned out that I was a natural at the banjo. It's just...
This is exactly what I was saying. This is exactly the type of thing that I remember.
I just picked it up and I was like, oh, yeah, I can play the banjo. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I could totally imagine that's what you so...
Oh, my family hated it. They were mad with me for that one, because everyone hates the banjo. And I just love it. It's just hilarious. It's really funny. I love it. Yeah. Yeah,
it is. No, I can imagine. So then, now we've done that, because I think that's a really interesting point. Because occasionally I interview people who've started off with music and then they've gone off somewhere else, and sometimes they come back.
Yeah, definitely.
But often that beginning part of having that sort of interest and really sort of getting good at something, it gets sort of transferred onto something else.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I was quite interested in it. So then, the animals. Okay, so so you got these animals, and you've obviously got quite a few of them before they have to earn their keep. So how did you start acquiring animals?
Well, I don't really know. I'm not really sure what happened. I mean, I can tell you some examples, but what happened? So when I met my now husband, he was allergic to furry animals, and he had things like tarantulas and bearded dragons, those kind of pets. And he would go travelling with some friends, across the world, going exciting places, and he'd leave his pets behind with his housemates, and he would be concerned, and they were very good looking after them. So he kind of brought, when we started dating, he'd bring me his weird things and I would look after them, and slowly over time the weird things stayed with me, and he seemed to almost forget that they existed, and they sort of morphed into my pets. And then when we were living together, it sort of snowballed. Like, I can't even remember the first animal, but there was one time I can remember that really is like the pinnacle moment for me, where something was happening and we knew then that something was happening, which was we both came home from work, from our respective jobs, with the bearded dragon. So we hadn't had any communication with each other.
You both turned up with a bearded dragon.
And we came home with a bearded dragon. And I thought, okay, what's happened here? And it was similar stories where he'd gone to work and someone had a bearded dragon that belonged to their son who was at university. And he'd said, oh, you know, my wife's got lots of pets. My girlfriend at the time, my girlfriend's got lots of pets. And they'd sort of thought that it would be a nice tip. And so they gave it to him. And he came home a bit confused because it's not a tip, because these things cost money to take care of. He brought it home. And then I brought home one in a similar sort of situation where that kept happening, where people kept saying, oh, you've got lots of pets, or you like animals. And I just said, oh, okay, and sort of brought them home. And then another thing that happened, and there was that, and then somebody dumped 6 ferrets in a rabbit hutch out on our driveway, and it was around November time and it was really wet, and I looked out the window and I could see something out there, and it was a really horrible day and really rainy, and I thought, oh, someone's flight it. And it was out on the bank by the road. So I didn't go out there, and I didn't go out there till the next day, and I didn't know there was live animals in it. And there were these 6 live ferrets, absolutely soaked.
In a bag?
Sorry?
In a bag?
No, they were in a little tiny rabbit hutch.
Oh.
And every time every car went past, there's this huge puddle in the road outside our property. Every time a car went past, the wave would go into this little hutch, and these little things were completely soaked through. So it was obviously other people were realizing before I realized that I was doing this, you know. So I had to get on board with it. You know,
that's interesting. I mean, because normally you don't sort of think, well, somebody likes animals, so here's a ferret. I mean, I
had when my kids were at school, because obviously I took my kids out of school and started home educating them. So it's quite interesting that you said about me getting annoyed at school for being, you know, someone trying to force my creativity into a box, because I took my kids out of school and home educated them, and it was the best thing I ever did for them. But I remember being in the school car park and someone saying, I've got a cockerel in the box in the boot of my car, and my husband says, you know, to get rid of it. And if I just give it to you, don't tell me what you do, but just it has to go or he'll kill it. But, you know, if you kill it, just don't tell me, sort of thing. And handed me a chicken. And then another lady at the school said, I've got a bat on my staircase. Can you come and help me with the bat? And, you know, bats, you have to be careful because they can carry rabies, because they can come across from France. So you have to be careful when you're handling them. So I had to go and do a bat. So everyone else knew before I knew, and then I had to get on board with that. And that's, people always ask me about that, about with animals, what's your next animal? And I say, well, I now understand completely what's happening, and it's not that I get to choose the animals choose me. So I just have to be at peace with this who knows what's coming next mentality. And roll with it, and that works now. I understand, like the universe understood. It's fine. Yeah,
that's fascinating. It's really fascinating. So you were saying about, you know, these animals having to earn a living. So
yes,
or earn their keep, I should say.
Yes.
So
how did I start?
How does that start? Because did you not?
Well, again, sorry.
Early on, you had a pig, didn't you?
I did. I had a pig, but before I had the pig,
oh right,
before I had the pig, maybe I can't remember. I've got a terrible memory, but I do know that when I was still working in youth work, and this idea was formulating in my head, and it was going around, and I'm plotting this in my mind. My husband said they've got to earn their keep. They've got to. It's going around and around in my head. I was still a youth worker, and I was still teaching toddlers music, so I started taking animals into youth work, and I found that when I had to do really boring things with them, which was everything's accredited, and so you've got a bunch of 17,
yes,
so you've got a bunch of 17-year-old boys, and my objective is to get them off the street and into a club. But once I get them in there, I have to say something mundane like, so do you think about teeth hygiene regularly? But I'll scare them off if I do that. But my job is to keep them in the club. So why am I now boring them with chats about teeth hygiene or something mundane like that? So I found that if I brought in an animal, like a tarantula or whatever it was, and they were handling it, and while they were looking at it and going, wow, I didn't say so. Do you like its fangs? And they'd go, yeah. And I'd go, so how do you look after your teeth? And they wouldn't even notice what I was doing. And I would just go off afterwards and fill the form in and say we did it, without them actually having to consciously go through that boring activity with me. So I realised how wonderful I could communicate better with these young, usually better with the guys, how they couldn't communicate very well with me. But when I had the animals in the room, suddenly they got a lot better at communicating because they didn't have to look at me. They were looking at the animal and then they just chatted away. I did that. And then also I stopped teaching toddlers music was the next step. But I said that all the mums said, no, you can't stop. And I said, but there's something, I'm moving on to do something new now. And they went, no, but we love coming to your group. So I thought, well, if it's the group they like and they don't care what I do, maybe I could show them the animals. So I started something called Musical Menagerie, and and Musical Menagerie was so popular. I'm not doing it right now because I stopped during the pandemic, but it was so popular. I didn't make any money, and I just couldn't afford to keep running it after the pandemic because I was basically funding it. But it was a toddler group where we would play instruments together, and I'd play the guitar and they'd come over and play the guitar. Some of them even bought little guitars. I had a cheap blue guitar that I bought at a boot fair that I didn't care if it got injured. And my pig that you talked about, a bit of hole in it. And they loved that because it had bite marks from the pig in it. And so it didn't matter if they smashed it or they'd break a string. And I'd say to the parents, it doesn't matter, because the parents would say, no, don't go near Maria's guitar when she's playing. And I say, no, they can come and join in. And it didn't matter if they break a string. Exactly. Or it's just a cheap, I'll go and buy another £7 guitar at a boot fair. It doesn't matter. And some of them would then ask for guitars for their birthday, and they'd have like little blue ukuleles, and they'd bring them in and show me, and they'd play with me. And we'd learn about a different animal each week. And I'd have to make, this is where the penultimate creativity of my adult life has been, writing nursery rhymes about animals. So I wrote songs about like the life cycle of a badger, or
you see, this is totally in my frame of things, because I get kids writing songs and stuff like that, and of course, as you say, it's a bit of a Trojan horse. You can do so many things with music that actually you're showing them something else, really.
Yes, yeah.
You're showing them how to be creative, or you're showing them not to be, this sort of thing of music being set up on a pedestal type of thing, like, well, you mustn't touch the guitar and you must do this.
Not acceptable.
No, just play, and so that you sort of, kids really get the opportunity to experience things and create sounds without it being special or clever.
Yeah, it being tangible.
Exactly. And I would say, obviously, the same thing happens with animals. See, you introduce an idea. I think it's so brilliant. So you were bringing in, they were obviously writing a nursery rhyme about, as you say, the life cycle of whatever, a bat or whatever.
Yeah.
So did you find, I mean, a lot of children, obviously they see cats and dogs and stuff like that. Yeah. But for a lot of children, they don't really get an awful lot of interface with anything else, do they?
No, they don't. But their reaction is quite interesting, because they're very blasé to things they've never met before, but they are wildly excited about something that they have at home, which grown-ups struggle with this concept. And I spend so much time on a daily basis trying to explain to adults when, they may be booking me at a preschool, and they go, we want the children to see a chameleon and a tarantula. And I go, okay, I can bring some things that I wouldn't. I'd bring something age appropriate but similar. But can I also suggest I'd bring a bunny rabbit and a guinea pig? And they go, oh no, they've got those at home. And it's a real adult mindset where we think that the children just want to see new. Sometimes they don't want to see new things. And I know why. The reason they want to see the obvious is because they know what it is, and then they want to tell me all the clever things they know. So a 3-year-old will say, that's a guinea pig, and it goes squeak squeak, and it eats carrots, and I go, you're right, and they look around the room and they go, see, I knew all about guinea pigs, and they want to have that validation. And if it's an animal they've never seen before, they can't impress me with their knowledge. I'm just talking to them saying, this is a so-and-so. And I find it's quite interesting to think about maybe the education. This is probably coming from someone who's a home educator. It interests me about the sort of education environment that when I go in there as a visitor, children are desperate to tell me what they know, like no one is listening to them. They're so desperate. They're like, oh, I know. And they're like, stop telling me stuff. I want to tell you. And then I just tell them when they're right or wrong. And if they're wrong, they go, well, how am I wrong? Children don't mince their words, They go, I think you'll find I'm right. And I go, well, no, you're not. And I explain to them, but they want to tell me what they know. And no one seems to listen. And same when I go in care home, they just want me to listen to their stories,
Yes. Well, the interesting thing, obviously, with children is, as you know, they can watch the same program over and over.
Yes,
over
exactly.
Again.
Yeah.
And it's not about, because an adult would think, well, that's sort of boring.
Yeah.
Not to them. But that's not really where they are in that. It might be boring for you.
Yeah.
It might be boring for the fact that you're just reading the same story for the 100th time. But that's not the point. Yes. It's all about building a relationship with something for them that they feel completely, they know the way the thing works, because obviously, and I see this, God, I've seen this all my life with teaching, things that, as you say, they're not what we think as adults.
Yeah.
You watch how the children learn and express themselves, and it's never really how adults think that they're doing the thing,
No.
And because there's something else going on. It's whether, I always like to think of it that it's like the right side of the brain that does something very different from our logical, this leads to that and whatever. It's this sort of thing that it's building a narrative or doing something that it's not really mapped. It's not really anything, but it's an important thing for their self-esteem and confidence and how they engage with the world. And as you say, if a child can turn around and go, I know what that is.
Yes.
That's powerful for a child. Extraordinary.
It's so powerful. It really is. And when you're right there and you're going, wow, you knew that. And I'm a stranger that they've not met. And I'm looking them in the eyes and wow, aren't you clever? That you just see them just come alive right there in front of you. And for me, what I know is, great, I've done my job and they're having a good time. But now I've got them on my side, because same as in youth work, if you listen and you prove that you're listening and basically saying, I'm hearing you, then you find that young person is more receptive. It doesn't matter if they're 4 or 14. If you hear them and they know you hear them, then they start actually listening to you. And if you've got further information on whatever subject it is to provide, you've got them on board at that point.
Absolutely. Brilliant. So we've got the beginnings of this wonderful thing. So at this point then, what have you got?
Not right now.
No, not right now. Let's at the beginning. Let's start from here, because it gets even more.
Oh, you'll have to remind me.
But what's that? I can't remember. Was it Dinky?
I had a pig called Dinky. She was a pot-bellied pig, and she was my house pig. She lived in the house. The thing is, people are always really surprised when you say I've had a house pig. They find that really shocking. But if you understand that they're around the 4th most intelligent animal in the world, and the best thing when I say this to people, and you won't do it, but when I say that the 4th most intelligent animal in the world, lots of people say, well, what's the first? And I think that is the best reply I can get from anyone, Yeah. Clearly not humans.
No, absolutely not.
When they go, what's the first? Well, it's obviously not us, is it? If you have to ask that question. But so they're the rounds, some scientists will argue 4, 5, 6. They're in that kind of category of intelligence. And they have the intelligence of around a 4-year-old human. So actually having one in your house isn't as horrendous as people think. If you have a 4-year-old child in your home, then there's nothing judgmental you can have towards someone that keeps a pig in the house. They're easier to house train than a dog, and I can vouch for that because I had a pig before I ever owned a dog. And I was really frustrated when we've only had one puppy, And I was really frustrated housebreaking him because he took forever compared to a pig that just took a few days. It was a lot harder to do because pigs understand you. And she was really bright. She knew left and right and yes and no and all sorts of commands. And she had her own settee. So she had her own settee that she used to. It was an old Edwardian settee that I'd bought with the plan to have it reupholstered for my husband to reupholster, and he's never got around to it. It's still in his workshop now, just springs. And so it ended up being her settee. And then we had a skunk, and the skunk shared the settee with her.
Right. So now let's get on to the skunk. I want to come back to the Dinky.
Yeah.
Because they were the first photographs that I saw, I was thinking, like, this is really interesting. What's going on here? So the skunk then.
Yeah.
That's an unusual animal to have on board. Or did you just get given this?
Yes, the first skunk I had, Humbug, the story of Humbug, the first skunk. Humbug. So Humbug came here. What happened was I was already doing sessions at this point. So I was already running some sessions, and someone emailed me, and they were already doing what I was starting to do, and they were going through divorce, and they weren't able to carry on running this business. And they wanted to rehome their entire animal collection. It turned out their husband owned the property, and she was the one that was having to go. So he wouldn't let the animals stay there, indefinitely. So that, they had to be rehomed. I think she was possibly moving to France, I think the story was. And she sent me an email saying, I've got this collection of animals for sale, but she wouldn't split them. Now, I, at this point, I'd already made friends with other people that work with animals and were in the industry, if you like, or working with animals. So that's people that did similar thing to me or worked in zoos or animal rescue centres, all that kind of thing. And it turned out that we'd all had the same email from her. So she was contacting lots of people. And so we were chatting about it, and everyone said, well, I'd have this animal or I'd have that animal, but I couldn't take an entire collection, like basically a small zoo collection of animals. I couldn't do that. So I said to my husband about it and said, blah, 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 this lady sent me, blah, blah, blah. And he's never listening. He's in his own world. Okay, yes. And what I'd asked was, could we go and get all the animals in his big transit van and drive to Wales? And yes, he said, yes, it's fine. So I think, if I've got this right, it was a few days before Christmas when we went and got them. It was close to Christmas, which probably might have something to do with I hardly ever see anyone at Christmas, because I think perhaps that was the last Christmas anyone ever really visited me, because when they came, my house was just full of cages to the ceiling and I looked like I was completely insane. But it was just a temporary thing, because I did rehome the animals to people that were more experienced than me or wanted particular animals. And that's what we did. I took them all in, and then I kept the ones that I was confident or wanted to keep, and then found other people I knew that were better off with the other animals. There was this parrot, this tiny little parrot thing, and it really bonded with my husband. It really loved him, and it would sit on his shoulder and eat breakfast. But we'd always said that we wouldn't keep that we'd never kept those kind of birds, and that would definitely have a new home. But he took a long time finding the right home. And eventually he settled on this gentleman who was a single older gentleman who went to the pub every day, and he was going to take the little parrot on his shoulder with him. And my husband said, he's the one. And he turned down lots of affluent people who I thought, well, they'll really be able to provide for it really well. And he said, they're not the right person. This guy is going to be his best friend. It's going to be his special companion. So he wouldn't part with it till he found a guy that he thought was going to have this emotional connection with this little parrot. So that's how the first skunk came. She was in that group of animals, or Humbug. And I'm on skunk number 3 now. They've all been adult skunks, all rehomed. Right.
So how difficult are skunks to keep? Because obviously people would just think, oh my God, that's just...
Well, back when we got Humbug, he'd been the age he was at. He'd lived through the time when in the UK it was still legal to remove their scent glands. So That would have been prior to 2005, 2006, because in 2006, the first Animal Welfare Act came out. And in that, there's basically 5 key rules about animal keeping, about, being free from fear and pain and distress, and being able to behave naturally. And if you take the glands out of a skunk, it can't behave naturally, it can't defend itself, so it's paranoid and nervous, and they're really confident little creatures. So you weren't able to do that anymore. So he came from a time when perhaps more people had them because they were kind of risk-free, but he had the side effects that you associate with that, which was he was quite grumpy, and he would get anal prolapses because the glands are up their bottom. Right. And it'd be quite sad because you would see him, he'd have it wasn't extreme prolapse, but he'd little prolapse, and you'd see him he'd sit himself up like a little man, and he'd sort of back himself into a corner and prop himself up, and then he'd try and push his little prolapse in with his paw. So it was something obviously that he had lived with, because he'd have had the gland removed as a baby. So he'd sort of lived with it and dealt with it himself for some time.
That's amazing. That is an amazing story.
Yeah, so that was our first one.
Imagine humans doing that.
We don't have a good pain threshold, do we? We make a fuss. That's the very important thing about animals, is they just get on with it.
Slipping further and further down the down the intelligence ladder.
Well, yeah, I have low estimation now of the more this happens to everyone. Everyone that works with animals, there's a theme you will find with us, which is we don't have very high estimations of people. No. Because the more time you spend with animals, the more you think, what fuss people make about stuff, and our attitudes, our behaviour, everything, we could really do a lot better.
Yeah, totally. So we've got skunk number 1, humbug.
Yes. Yeah.
We got Dinky.
Yeah.
So what else? What were the star turns in your?
Oh, I mean, you'd have to.
Not necessarily. People. I shouldn't have said that, really, should I?
Well, I know it's difficult. No, my interpretation and what the general public's interpretation are different, because to me, I might say something like a stick insect. It's something that because I spend so much time with animals, I probably see them and their personalities differently to maybe other people would. Like, for example, the skunk thing. People go, ugh, but then they get to know them and see how amazing they are, how friendly they are. So, if people just meet them once or twice, they might not know what they're like. My foxes, of course. Everyone knows me as Fox Lady. Foxes have been a big thing. There's my fox mug, you see. Foxes. That's a customer gave me that. Foxes have played a big role in my animal side of my life, and I volunteered with a national organisation rescuing wild foxes. So yeah, I think a lot of people, when they think of me, think of foxes.
Yeah, well, they are amazing creatures, aren't they? They are so amazing. I mean, I've always been fascinated by foxes.
They're naughty.
They are, and also they've got that sort of thing when, if you sort of meet one in the wild, I've a couple of occasions where I've been out walking and you see one appearing out of something with like a rabbit in its mouth or something.
Yeah.
And they sort of look at you like, yeah, and they give you that sort of look like,
what are you going to do? Well, also, I know what the fox is thinking. The fox is thinking, you don't want this, do you? Because he's going to go and hide it. Yeah. And he's thinking, oh, damn it, I was going to go and hide it in that bush over there. You've seen me, and we have to go in a different direction to what you were expecting now. So, they're food driven, but they're low down. They're a predator, but they're low down predators. So in their natural habitat, when we didn't get rid of all the bears and the wolves and everything, they would hunt their prey, and then someone else would come along and snatch it from them. The big bully in the playground would come and take it. So that's why they're that sneaky, conniving kind of character, because they've got to catch that food and then they've got to hide it for a bear or a wolf snatches it from them. So that's why they have that behaviour.
Yeah, but it's just that, the way they seem to be always sort of summing up the situation quite quickly.
Always. Yeah.
That's
because
always
that. It's because of that position that they're supposed to have. And there's not enough generations of foxes to have happened since we took away those larger predators. So they still have that instinct to be constantly, and they don't. They're like they always sleep like one eye open in case something happens. And when people visit my foxes, they always say, "Oh, they're awake in the day," because they're awake in the day and they're jumping on people. And one of them lets you stroke him and you feed him, and they go, "But why?" They think I've done something to change their behaviour to get them up in the daytime. No, foxes are out at night because that's when it's safest, and my foxes are safe, so they get up in the day. They don't need to hide in the day. That's why they're up. Yeah.
I get that. No, that's amazing. So, okay, so. This is a bit of a tally because there's. Just tell me what you've had. Give me a list.
I'll try. Okay, so we've done foxes. I had the Japanese word is tanuki. They're a wild Asian dog. She came from Wales with that first skunk. They're now banned. Sorry.
What was the dog called?
The Japanese, I use the Japanese word tanuki because the English word for them is confusing. The English word is raccoon dog. They're not raccoons. They're in the same family as other canids. So that would be, your wolves and hyenas and dogs and foxes. They're all canids. So I had her. She came from Wales with that first skunk. Snakes. I've got a huge boa constrictor, rabbits, guinea pig. I've had African pygmy hedgehogs. I've got giant tortoises. I've got a fair few of those monsters.
Because I saw a photograph and I thought, what's that? So, first of all, it was like I was trying to get my head around this tortoise with a dog sitting on top of it, and I was thinking,
that's Victor. That's my. This Victor. He came with his name. And that was my teacup chihuahua, almost my daughter's dog, the chihuahua, having a ride because she's only got little legs, so she rides on the tortoise. He's my biggest one. He weighs more than me. He's only 22, or he'll be 23 this year. And he has an amazing story. His story is amazing. His owner bought him in a DIY store 23 years ago as a baby. And it was her anniversary, and her and her husband are in the DIY store, and they see this tortoise for sale. There's a little box of tortoises. So they say, "Well, what happens? How big do they get?" And the guy in the shop said, "Well, about the size of a dinner plate." So she turns to her husband and said, "Oh, you said you were going to get me something for my anniversary. I'd like a little tortoise." So they have this tortoise, and he doesn't stay little forever, and he gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And they just had like a normal little back garden, and they realised that they couldn't really look after him properly. So they make contact with an animal rescue centre, very similar to me as a guy of a farm who had did the same thing. He didn't take the animals out, but he took the animals in the same way that I do. So they arranged for him to collect the tortoise, and he was in Swindon or somewhere, and they were up north somewhere. So he's driven up there and he's collected the tortoise. She was really teary, she was really upset, and he said, "Well, I'll give him a good home and we'll keep in touch, blah blah blah." He takes the tortoise back to his place, and as far as she's aware, that's the end of the story. They keep in touch for a bit, and then she loses touch with him. He said that his dad had been ill, so she just presumed he's busy. And then one day she's reading her newspaper, Sunday paper, having a relax. And there's this article about a gentleman that's not a very nice person, shall we say, and he's done some very unpleasant things. And he's been sent to prison. And she realises that it's the guy who took the tortoise. So she's absolutely spare and trying to find out where on earth her tortoise is, because she was so distressed to get rid of him in the first place. It's only because she couldn't provide him with what he needed. She can't find a tortoise. Well, what's happened is the guy's gone to prison and the tortoise was sent to the National Centre for Reptile Welfare. The chairman is a friend of mine, and it was my birthday, and I said I was interested in this big tortoise he'd had come in, and he said, "Why don't you come down and we'll talk big tortoises?" And I went down. My husband and I had been away for the weekend, and my husband said, "Before we go home, let's your birthday weekend, we'll drop in and look at this tortoise." So we look at this tortoise and I'm like, he's so lovely. And I'm like, hi, I'm talking to him. And he turns around to my husband and he says, well, she's obviously in love with the tortoise. The next thing I know, it's being loaded in the back of my van and I'm going, hang on a minute, I haven't filled in any paperwork. He's patting me on the back and saying goodbye. He wanted that out of the centre. Well, I think he wanted them out of the centre really quick. He'll probably say this is part of it, is he's a nightmare, he's ginormous, but also probably because of the maybe slightly high profile situation that was going on, it was best to get him out of the picture quick. So anyway, this lady now knows her tortoise is not where he's supposed to be. He's at this point been living with me for probably a year or so, maybe more. She goes to her local paper, or she goes to the paper in Swindon, I think, actually, and says, where's Victor? Where's my Victor? And they run a thing that says, where's Victor? And there's a picture of a little tortoise and she's all sad and it's saying, where is he? Someone saw it and said that they knew where he was. And we contacted her and said it's okay, and she's come down and see him. So it's okay. Good. She's met him and she's happy now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's such a lovely story. I mean, because obviously I can't, I can't remember when, because obviously kids had tortoises when I was, and then it was sort of like, well, you don't have tortoises anymore. I can't remember when that sort of happened. It was like, well, we shouldn't really, blah, blah. But you saying that, 20 odd years ago, and obviously it's not just a small tortoise, is it? It's a gigantic one.
Right, tortoise.
So yeah, so obviously I'm assuming that stuff, there's not, what things are not being traded now? Oh,
so there was, I think there's a bit of confusion in the general population about tortoises, because the CITES list for endangered species, some tortoises were put on that list, and it just meant that you couldn't import wild ones into the UK. Yeah. So you could still breed them in the UK. They had to just have a paper trail like a pedigree dog. Yeah. And I think when that happened, people got confused and thought that you couldn't keep tortoises anymore.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was. Not that, say I had a tortoise when I was a little boy, and it disappeared, and then about 4 years later it came back.
Yeah. It was there all along, you see. They're just very good at hiding.
Yeah, just came back. Just sort of wandered in. Yeah, it's amazing. Bizarre.
They have a long life, they don't need to see you all the time. They're going to see you for the whole of your lifetime and more. So I wanted to few years off.
That is really weird, isn't it? That they've got this extraordinarily long lifespans.
Yeah.
So we're slipping even further down this ladder now.
Slippery slope. My husband calls it the slippery slope. Anyone that knows Maria, and then they see the fun side of the animals, they go on a slippery slope with pets because I'm a bad influence.
Yeah. That's quite good. It's good for people to wake up to things and realise that we're not that important.
We're not.
No, we're not. Absolutely. Brilliant.
I'm glad you said it first, because my husband said to me earlier, he said, you're not going to go on about how humans are so insignificant and not important, but you said it first. So there you go, because that is pretty much sums up my...
It's absolutely important for humans to sort of, if people could think a little bit more like that, they take life in they'd live life in a different way, and they'd interact with the world in a different way.
Human-centric. That's the phrase I use. People are very human-centric. Just in my day-to-day conversations with people, it's human-centric. That they're not looking outside of human, but we're part of we're part of something bigger, and we have to look at all the parts.
Yes, totally. I absolutely, totally agree with you on this. Now, so you've had some other interesting things happen recently. Because I keep an eye open on Facebook and stuff like that when things flash up. Did you do some sort of film or something? What was that? What was this?
No. Well, no. I had some film students. They were at the London College of Arts, I think, is it called? And they were doing their postgraduate, the end of their post. So they were finishing their postgraduate degrees, and they were their MAs, and they had to do documentaries there was different subjects, and the guys that I met and followed me, their this plays in well for you, I guess. Their subject that they chose from the given subjects was humans and their relationship with animals. So they followed me. They were all from China. They're Chinese students studying in the UK, which was quite fun.
That's great.
It was fun because I learned. I was always asking them questions, and they were asking me questions, and we were learning a lot about each other because they were just around other students. So to come out of London and come and meet a real English person that wasn't in the sort of London or student scene, I think they might have felt more. They asked me things I thought, well, you've been here a few years studying. Surely you've asked somebody this before. But I think they kind of felt more comfortable sometimes asking me things that they hadn't asked before. So that was quite fun for me too. It wasn't completely one way. I enjoyed having them here and learning from them about their life and things that that I didn't know or would have interpreted wrong. And they followed me. They were very sweet, and they followed me and my life. They were like a fly on the wall. And they observed everything. They observed me making elderflower cordial.
Oh, wonderful. Brilliant stuff.
Just everything, cooking my dinner, or making, I think I'd made some preserves or something, and they watched me do that. And to things like just hanging out with ducklings, it'd be weird. They'd just be like, oh, carry on, and you'd be laying there sunbathing with a duck, and they'd be like, just carry on doing what you're doing. And so that was quite fun.
Interesting because I've taught some Chinese pupils, and obviously they're quite, how can I put this? They're incredibly polite.
Oh, yes.
Right. And they don't like to ask questions where they would appear to be rude.
Yes.
Or asking something that's inappropriate, I think is
inappropriate, yeah.
So therefore, the idea of and then they would have been given a lot of information about what the English were like, or the British, right? Because that seemed to be one of those things about what the culture was like. And of course, when they come over, it's a bit like, it's nothing like that.
Mm.
So that must have been an amazing example for them, that they're coming to a place that they would think, well, the idea that people would be preserving jam or making elderflower cordial or just going out foraging would be like that. They wouldn't have expected that, probably.
No, they asked lots of questions all the time, about what I was doing and why. But also, actually, it opened up for me behind the camera, off camera conversations. Like there was two of them were young women, and they were really quiet and really polite, and they hardly ever said a word or give you eye contact. But when they observed me doing food making tasks, suddenly they came alive. One of them got her phone out and showed me all this beautiful food she made. She said, I can't remember if it was someone's birthday or Lunar New Year or something, and she had done the food for everyone. And she was showing me all the pictures of this lovely food she'd made, all these lovely things. And she said, all my friends all really enjoyed it, and I felt very special for making it. And the other one was telling me about what she enjoyed about her mum's cooking or her family food. They suddenly came alive and were chatting, and it was quite eye-opening that suddenly, where they'd been wouldn't say hardly a word to me unless they were forced to, suddenly they opened up, and it was really nice
because that's the thing, isn't it? When you look at different cultures, food is pivotal, isn't it, to everything. I mean, if you imagine if you found yourself in an Italian village or something, and then as soon as you get to the food, then it all starts to make sense. And that's definitely true with the Chinese, and all these cultures where what their mothers did, it's almost like that sacrosanct, that how you made a curry or something if you were and all the rest of it, how you did that, because that's the way it was done. And I think that's the thing that that is the thing for women from another culture, that really that thing of their interaction with food and family and what it is, what it means, because that might be something they wouldn't have assumed we still had here, Well,
it's the Italian phrase, eat to live or live to eat, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. But, if they've been told that, most people go out and buy ready-made food, because obviously they get told lots of things, or we go out and buy fish and chips, or something, because you don't know what they're told. But then when they're prepped up about what they're likely to see, then it must be very different to see that.
They were so sweet, but there was quite a few shocks for them. They obviously followed me everywhere. So when I got in the car, they would get in the car with me. And I'm just driving locally, rurally. And I don't know, I overtook a tractor, obviously, because tractors go at like a mile an hour. So, on a nice straight road, nothing scary. I just overtook a tractor. And the most talkative one, the lad in sort of charge of the whole project, he said, you don't drive like women drive it in China. And
Right.
To say, I'm not sure if it was a compliment or he was in shock. But I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they're much more shy, Chinese ladies, when they're driving. And he was just really, but his face was a picture. He was so perplexed that I overtook a tractor.
I think it might have been you were overtaking a tractor. I think that might have been
it was fun. It was really, really fun, and we learned lots about each other. So I did enjoy that. I'm yet to see. They invited me to the presentation in London, but they didn't give me enough notice. I couldn't get down there in time. But I will eventually get to see it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's good. Well, would you? Trouble is, you won't be able to sort of post it up, will you? Or will you? Will they give you links to it?
No, actually, they did promise me that they will make me something that they don't mind being seen.
Oh, okay.
By other people, because obviously this is their university work, so it might be that they don't want the whole world to see it, but they did say that they will make me something that is publishable so that other people can have a little taste of what they did.
Cool. That's brilliant. So what stuff have you got that you do now? What is your sort of regular things with the animals and what have you? What's your...
Like work-wise, career-wise. So I go into schools a lot. I do animal care courses in schools. Again, probably, I sound like a massive home educator. But they don't teach on the syllabus in schools about animal welfare or animal care. But lots of children and lots of families own pets, but they haven't had any kind of formal or informal training to take care of those animals. Even when you have a baby, they offered antenatal classes, but there isn't anything like that for pet keeping, which is strange, really, when you think that there is the Animal Welfare Act. There's 2 acts now, and if you don't do the things you're supposed to do, you can legally find yourself in trouble. But they don't tell you that those rules are there, and unless someone like me tells you, you don't know what they are or that they're there. So it just seems very strange that this isn't, if we're going to let children have hamsters and goldfish or whatnot, that we're not also teaching them the basics, So I go into schools and I do it from year R up into secondary school. I do a local secondary school. I've been there for years now. I took over from a tutor from Harle College, and I've been there doing it every Wednesday for seems like forever now. We're year 7 and 8. So that takes up some of my weekdays, and then I go into care homes and I work with special needs a lot, which I'd say is my favourite work of all. Is working with anyone with special needs or neurodivergency. That is, I am at my most comfortable and happiest in that environment. If I've got to be with people, it's that people.
I think I can see that would have a massive impact on people.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Some people are brought to tears, and it's happy tears. It's just the fact that they've been able to have that connection, and then others are just the sort of bursting out, giggling and laughing, and there's some centres I've been going to for a very long time, and those centres are fantastic where they have regular participants that over the years I've got to know, and I walk in the room and I'm like, hi so and so, hi so and so, and I know their different personalities, how to approach them differently, what their ability is, what their learning difficulty is, what animals they're into, and it's just really, really rewarding, and I'm enjoying myself as much as they are, I think, and I can't really put my finger on why, because I'm sure when I go into a primary school or anywhere else that they are getting a really good experience, but I just having a wonderful time as well. Yeah.
That's brilliant stuff. Well, we've been chatting for about an hour. It's pretty good. That's what. That's so good. Now you've got. What have you got? A Facebook or a website or something? I'll pop some things on the show notes.
Yeah.
Do. But have you got? Yeah. So what is it? A website?
Yeah, we got a website, and we're on Facebook as well. The website, I'm not really into technology. I don't update it very often, but the Facebook, I do try to go on our Facebook page, and I post regular photos of the animals and things that we're doing on there. And I try to keep that updated.
Okay. I'll put these on because the pictures are brilliant. They're so good. So I'll put that on the show notes and stuff, and that'd be great. Yeah, it's good. Lovely. Well, lovely to see you again after all these years.
Yeah.
It's quite a long time, but yeah, it's good. All right. So hopefully speak again soon.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you.